Why am I talking about another pandemic? Didn't we just go through one in the past few years? What is Nipah or the Nipah virus? I'm going to share something with you that is important. It's about a new story. But in reality, I anticipated this conversation easily, probably about 8 months ago. And what I did is I did a presentation on that Nipah virus, the next deadly global outbreak. This was in July 6, 2025. So my Substack has a number of very important collections of thoughts that are sometimes years ahead of what you will find out eventually. So I'm leading you to take a good listen to that because I'm not going to go through the whole thing in great detail at the moment. But I'm telling you what is happening now. And so currently, this is in the BBC News. Nipah virus outbreak in India triggers Asia airport screenings. And this was the 27th of January 2026. And they're talking about this deadly Nipah virus in India's West Bengal state, sparking concerns in parts of Asia. Thailand is screening passengers. Two cases have been confirmed in West Bengal, and so you may be wondering, why did I talk about this in July 2025? And why am I making reference to it now? In order to understand the significance of this, I need you to understand patterns. And all I can say, and this is just my thought, okay? It's very important to remember I'm not telling you what is. I'm just sharing with you some ideas based on my observation over many years of following the pandemic. It just so happens that coincidentally in 2024 there was a national blueprint for biodefense, and they were looking to defend against biological threats. And this is what I covered in the Substack. So I've covered it in more detail in the Substack, but just understand this. What they had as one of the scenarios in this was that a nation or a terrorist group attacked the US nation's capital and US cities on Independence Day. And this is just theoretical. The infectious agent they used killed 280,000 Americans and infected at least 400,000. So, again, this is purely theoretical. And the lab test confirmed the Nipah virus caused the disease. So, this was the scenario that they ran in 2024. Okay, that's where we're starting. When we think of the Nipah virus, and there's a reason why this trajectory or this link with the pandemic is very important. Just a few simple points. This paper about the Nipah virus infection from 2018 in Singapore was just highlighting the characteristics of it. A clinical presentation ranges from asymptomatic infection to fatal encephalitis. So it's a pretty serious condition. Okay? Now, primarily, it was in contact with animals. However, as I slide down this page, I highlighted human to human transmission in the Malaysian outbreak. There were reports of person to person transmission. However, when they looked at greater than 300 healthcare workers in 3 hospitals that looked after 80% of the patients, there were no reports of any serious illness, encephalitis, or hospital admissions. This is important because this virus normally does not easily spread human to human. So here is the problem. I'm trying to think of how to say this without it coming across as some kind of conspiratorial idea. But you have to look carefully at the characteristics of this virus. It's deadly. Came from fruit bats, first identified in Malaysia in 1998. Mortality rate 40 to 75%. Contact with infected animals or fluids contaminated food, person to person is possible, and it was listed as a priority pathogen for pandemic potential. Can target multiple tissues. This is what I've covered. Now, this is where you need to think carefully. This is SARS-CoV-2. And what a lot of people do not understand is that one simple change on this spike protein, the furin cleavage site, converted what would have been a hard to transmit virus into a pandemic virus. Okay? So what I cover in that Substack, if you want to listen, is I ask the question, what would happen if a furin cleavage site, which gives a virus access to multiple cells to infect them, what would happen if that was added to a Nipah virus? That's essentially what I asked at the time. And the outcome was scary. So I think that one of the big mistakes from COVID-19 was not identifying exactly where this virus came from. We still theoretically have natural origin. We have idea it went from bats to the wet market. But if you look in any detail at the presentation of disease at the time, it's very clear that there was no real trail of infection coming into Wuhan. It's just so coincidental that this kind of virus was being studied close by, but it doesn't mean that it was lab origin. However, we don't have any absolute clarity that it could not have been. So here is the mistake that was made. We didn't force leaders to answer that question. Because if there are people who are willing to alter dangerous viruses so that they can damage the population, if people who did something like that got away with it, I guarantee you they would do it again. That's why I am worried. Because we are at a very unusual point in history. There are some very big things going on in the world. And I would not be surprised if people are not thinking about this kind of thing. But this would be on a different level to what happened before, if this were ever true. And so, don't ignore these points. This, as I said, I flagged this in July of 2025 because I knew straight away that this was an important point. I go through it here. I have the National Blueprint for Biodefense there if you wanted to look at it. I break down what the virus is, and critically, I tell you more detail about the furin cleavage site and why it's relevant. These are dangerous times. And I think we all have to be prepared that the worst could happen, but hope for the best. Let's just hope that this is another one of those limited things that happen, can't spread so easily because human-to-human contact is not so effective. And so, as happened in the past, this just dies out. But remember this, if this or any other virus like that starts to spread in an unusual way, it's unlikely that it would be natural. That's just my thought, but we will see. Thank you for listening. And please remember, look in the description, follow along with the links.
A hero An immune adventure. Humming Heroes, your lyrical guide to the body's defenders. Now on Amazon. Check the links below.